Hey everyone, let's talk about another beautiful essay today on libraries by Oliver Sacks. I believe you will enjoy listening to me for about 15 minutes. So it's the very first slide and a beautiful picture of a library. And down here is a beautiful quotation. A library is a rainbow in the clouds by Maya Angelou. Clouds stand for confusion, okay, illusion, maybe something hidden, and whereas a rainbow is polychromatic, it is beautiful and bright, that stands or signifies knowledge. Okay, definitely, library provides us knowledge. Look at the next picture. Okay, moving ahead. Here is a spectacular picture of a library. So definitely a library houses tons of books and it stores knowledge, right? So knowledge from primitive time till today. So we can see a library setup like this. Down here is a beautiful quotation. Nothing is pleasanter than exploring a library. We are talking about the pleasure that we gain by reading the books, right? So getting knowledge, getting ideas, forming our own understanding is a really pleasing thing. Here we go. Another quotation by Albert Einstein. What Albert Einstein says about library. So according to him, the only thing that you absolutely have to know is the location of a library. If you find the location that you can get there, you can just have beautiful time. You can go through the pages of books and you can explore things. You can find out new things. For a scientist like Albert Einstein, yeah, it is really important to find the location of a library. This signifies or this clarifies the importance of library. Another beautiful quotation here. Libraries are store the energy that fuels the imagination. So what a beautiful saying here. Fueling our imagination is necessary. We have to provide fuel to our imagination, to the human brain, right? Because we are overwhelmingly creative, and to sharpen our creativity all the time, constantly, we got to get to libraries and find new books, and we got to go through the volumes, right? Now here about the author. You can see a beautiful picture. And William Sachs was born in 1933 in London, in Great Britain, and in a family of physicians. His parents were medical students, and he graduated from Queen's College, Oxford. Dr. Oliver Sacks was a physician. He was a best-selling author and a professor of neurology. Okay, the New York Times has referred to him as the poet laureate of medicine. He's a great person. I mean to say, he was a neurologist and a literary writer. Okay, that's what about the writer. And here are a few books by Oliver Sacks. You can see Awakenings. These like books I wanted to present to you. Now about the text, what does this essay say to us? Let's have an eye on this slide. This short essay was posthumously published, means published after the death of the writer, in which Sachs recalls his childhood. Okay, it's also a narrative essay. Oliver Sacks tells us things about his childhood, right? In what environment he was brought up, and how he started developing some kind of hunger for reading, and reading particularly in libraries. That like idea has been stated in the essay. So in the essay, the writer examines the passion of his life and his love for libraries. Okay, this is the core idea of the essay. The next idea of the essay is given here. On libraries is written in praise of intellectual freedom and the ecstasy of serendipitous discovery. Okay, the essay is mainly about praise of intellectual freedom. That because if you go to a library, right, you can have intellectual freedom. There is nobody to tell you which book to go through and which chapter to prepare for. You are not studying for examinations or any kind of test. You're not completing any chapter there. So you got the freedom of studying by yourself, right? As long as you like. Okay, you may stay there for 15 minutes or maybe 2 hours. You do not have a professor or a teacher to give you a deadline. Okay, so you don't have any teacher telling you complete certain assignment within the stipulated time. Therefore, a library provides intellectual freedom. At the same time, it gives us joy. Ecstasy means joy, joy of serendipitous discovery. Now, you may be thinking of finding a book, but the time you are searching for the book, you may find another more important and influential book than the one that you were looking for, right? Therefore, you may be very lucky in a library. The writer was one of the titans shaped and saved by libraries, right? He had done his major, let's say, studying in library, right, rather than sitting in classes. So he was shaped and saved by libraries. So moving ahead, the very first point of this essay highlighted in this yellow line. So in this essay, Oliver Sacks remembers his childhood days. He first remembers the library at his own home. And yeah, according to the writer, when he was a child, his favorite room was his home library. It was here that his father had his special library. There was a collection of books by his father, by his mother. They were medical students, right? And there were also the adventure and history books belonging to his three older brothers, right? His mother had her favorite books in separate bookcases in the lounge. There were Dickens, Trollope, Thackeray, Shakespeare, Milton, etc. So many veterans, right? So great writers from the past. So they had written many books, and a collection of those books had been made in his home library. In the house, that library was the quietest and most beautiful and the favorite place for him. So, being that the reason, he used to curl up in a chair and would become engaged or completely absorbed in what he was reading, right? And every time he was late for his dinner or lunch, he would be found in the library, completely absorbed in a book. Okay, so that's how he used to study when he was a little child. So the first library for the writer was his home library, and his second library was Willisden Public Library. It was in his community, and when he started walking a few blocks away from his home, and he started getting to this Willisden Public Library, it was a general library, and when he would go through magazines and newspapers, and he's developed some sense of reading, let's say reading freely. Okay, so that's what he did later on as he grew up to be a child. The third point here, that what he says is that when he was in school, he was not a good pupil, not a good student, but a good learner. Okay, the writer highlights this thing. It's a very important thing here, right? You understand that a good student need not necessarily be a good learner. We come to know the crux of this essay, that the writer was not a good student. He did not like sitting in the classroom, and rather he liked to go to library and find the books of his interest and study by himself. So he was a good learner, not a good student. Okay, he disliked school because sitting in class receiving instruction and information, there was no freedom in the classroom. He did not want to become a passive receiver of thought and ideas. Rather, he wanted to become an active learner by himself. Okay. In library, he had the freedom to select whatever he wanted. He had the freedom to follow the paths which fascinated him, had the freedom to become himself, right? In library, he was free to look at the thousands of books, free to roam and to enjoy the special atmosphere and quiet companionship of others or the readers like himself. Therefore, rather than sitting in the classroom, he would like to go to library and study by himself. He goes on saying, clarifying that he was not a good student but a good learner. I believe you have understood this point. So the fourth point in this essay is all about the writer's fascination for science, right? As he grew up and he was about to pass his school level, and he grew increasingly fascinated towards sciences, because his parents were from science background. Okay, so tons of books were stored there, and he developed this fascination for science. As he got older, his reading was biased towards the sciences, especially astronomy and chemistry. And St. Paul's School had general library and the Walker Library, which had excellent books on history and politics. And similarly, at the Library of the Science Museum, he devoured volumes of chemistry. And in this way, okay, he studied quite a lot of science, right? Especially astronomy and chemistry. Okay, that's what he says. And he had fascination for science. Let's have an eye onto this Walker Library at St. Paul's School and Library of Science Museum. You can see these beautiful pictures here. So really a spectacular view of libraries over here. When the writer went to university, he had access to Oxford's two great libraries. The first was Radcliffe Science Library because he was a student of science, and the second was Bodleian. It was a general library and where he could go through volumes of literature. Okay. In Bodleian, he came across many books by Theodore Hook, for example, a man greatly admired in the 19th century for his wit and for his genius for theatrical and musical improvisation. So he was so much inspired by Theodore Hook that he wanted to write a book about this writer. All right, this like inspiration he got by going to Bodleian Library. So let's see the pictures, right? This one is Radcliffe Science Library, and whereas this one is Bodleian Library. Okay, moving ahead. And Queen's College Library was the best and the most influential library for the writer. So it was designed by Christopher Wren, a great SI designer of the time, and he had this library had underground heating pipes. So, and this library contained tons of ancient books, original editions of Darwin's books. Great writers and scientists had contributed their books to this library. He fell in love with the old books by Thomas Brown, and it introduced him to the 17th and 18th century literature. So I think, according to the writer, the most influential library for him was his college's library, that is Queen's College Library. And here is a picture, Library of Queen's College. You can see a grand view of this library. Moving ahead. Another library he mentioned this essay is AEC William, New York. He first went to New York City in 1965. He had a small apartment at that time. It is a pokey apartment, so there was not much space, but he was looking for space. So he liked to make a pile of books on his table and go through volumes of books at that time. And since he was working at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, after his duty and just got over, he would like to go to library and go through the volumes of books there, right? And so this library gave him plenty of space and freedom. All right, he goes on saying in the essay, he would sometimes discover a treasure over there. So sitting at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine library. So a very influential library in his life when he was in the United States of America. So here I have presented you a picture, the library at Albert Einstein College. Reading at library developed sense of community, intimacy, and friendship in the life of the writer, and he thinks the very thing happens for other readers even today. Okay, he says that though the library is a quiet place, right, you cannot be having a casual talk sitting in a library. You have to maintain silence because library rules are very strict. Okay, there could be some whisper conversations, right, between people, maybe two people, right? So if you are searching the same book, or you happen to see somebody sitting at the far table and going through the book that you want to read, and you just feel like sitting beside the person, and this whisper conversation may change into exciting new relationship, friendship. Okay, you may find somebody to talk to, right? So somebody having the similar kind of interest. So it also provides a place for making friends and developing some kind of companionship, says the writer towards the end of this essay. Okay, moving ahead. At the end of the essay, the writer talks about the changes taking place in the 1990s. At the time, the writer was visiting the library quite frequently, sitting at a table with a mountain of books in front of him. But there were many students like who were increasingly ignoring the textbooks and the bookshelves because they were accessing everything with the help of their computers, right? The books so far as the concern were unnecessary for many students, right? Since the majority of users were no longer using the books themselves, the college decided to dispose the books, right? And when the last time he visited the AECOM library, he was horrified because he found that the shelves were made empty. There were tons of books in the past, but now that he could not see those shelves occupied by the books, right? So most of the books from ancient time, from earlier time, they were disposed because there were hardly any students looking for them. Over the last few years, most of the books have been thrown out, and therefore the writer felt that a murder, a crime had been committed over there. There was a destruction of centuries of knowledge. There was a sabotage of knowledge, right? So he did not like it at all. And when he was distressed, one of the librarians there noticed him and came to tell him that everything that was important had already been digitized. Even then, the writer did not feel easy because he was a bibliophile. He was a lover of books, right? So he was deeply saddened by the loss of books and periodicals over there in AECOM library. Okay. So I think these are the overall matters the writer has included in the essay. Here are a few questions understanding the text. I believe you can answer these questions. All right, so some questions from reference to the context and a question for writing an essay, right? Thank you very much. Have a wonderful time ahead.